Unit 6.2, the 19th Century Society, Urbanization and Intellectual Movements is kind of where we're at. This is going to take us from 1800 to 1914. Guys, we are getting really close to modern times, and we're going to be up to World War I by next week. So we're at a very nice pace. So we've built a good foundation. Things should go smoothly here. This is the second industrial revolution. You will probably see a multiple choice question on the AP exam that asks you to detail the differences between the first and second industrial revolutions. And I'm going to kind of lay those out for you right here. It's an easy essay question, but I've seen it on almost every multiple choice section. So you'll want to keep in mind as we move through the differences between the two. Does anybody remember the main product? Zooming there, you have to know the difference between the two. So you know, first of all, the dates are different. The first one was 1780 to 1850. The second one we're going to see is going to take place in this time period, in our 1800s to 1914. The products were different. What was the main product of the first industrial revolution? Textiles. Very good. And where did the first industrial revolution primarily take place? England. And some in the lowlands. Those two are our leaders there. Also, you had coal and iron and railroads in the first industrial revolution. You're going to see some things building off of that, but some brand new things in the second. So textiles, coal, iron, and railroads with the first one. So our second one, steel. Big important advancement here, technology. You will never have a skyscraper if we never had steel. Iron was too brittle, and we talked about that with the first industrial revolution. You would not want to be in an iron skyscraper. That would be very bad for you. So steel production, we're going to see steel rails, larger structures, heavy machinery. This comes from the Bessemer process. We kind of alluded to this in the first industrial revolution. It takes more carbon out. It makes the metal stronger, and therefore you get, when the Bessemer process, you will get then steel. So stronger structures, voila. To Harold's Donuts. Give, yeah, with the Kewpie Donuts.
Yes.
Do they? No, I think that we need to find like a work day where we're working on our storyboards or something, and have like a coffee house, donut house walk.
Donut house.
Maybe we could even meet John. Like we take a tour to downtown.
Yes.
We get donuts. We don't have our storyboards or our topic or John yet, but everything else aside.
Everything else is
I think that'd be awesome. Get off campus, get some tea, get some coffee, get our creative juices going.
Yes.
Maybe sketch out some places downtown to video. All right,
Alrighty.
it's a deal.
All
All right, I like the connection. What was our connection there? Skyscrapers, tall
Yes.
buildings, because that's in Columbia all over the place. What's our tallest structure? Is a parking garage.
Yeah.
That's kind of embarrassing when you think about that. Our city, the tallest structure is a parking
We're not much of a city.
garage. Yes. I keep saying the only place Columbia really has to go after we've annexed all of the suburbs is up. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'd like to see in 10, 15 years where we're at. Anyway, side note. Yeah, our zoning laws are still pretty. We're still trying to be a rural community in an urban setting. We'll see. So next is oil. We're going to see kerosene for lighting, internal combustion engine. We're going to see factory machines. We're going to almost to the automobile, guys. Look how far it doesn't. It feels like yesterday that we were talking about the Dark Ages and like taking the Colosseum apart to build little huts in the countryside. Like we're in the automobile. We're up to almost World War One. Electricity, increasingly powered cities. England's going to build the first electric power station in 1881. Steel, textile, shoemaking, and construction industries use electricity. That's why England's the first with the first power station. We're also going to see here that this is where I kept telling you that Carnegie said pioneering don't pay. We're going to see England start to fall behind. If you've invested all of your money in the first product, other people steal those ideas and spend way less money to get the next new product. If you're England, you're with all of these big machines that cost you all of this money. You don't have the new money to reinvest and reinvent everything. So this is where we're going to see some new growth. So you need to go down to number 4, Germany. Not united as a country yet, but united economically by that Bund. We are going to see that they are going to step forward as our second industrial revolution leader. And that is going to be in chemicals, photo processing, dyes, soaps, pharmaceuticals, fertilizers, and explosives. So some new technologies here. We're almost a nation in Germany. We're almost a nation, and this push with industrialization is going to get us there. It's going to give us the economic backing to get Germany there. Okay. So expansion of industry and technology is going to create a growing demand for experts. I think I can move my slide here. Here are just some pictures. I didn't put a lot of words here because that's pretty easy. But you have, the first industrial revolution, the pictures that we talked about, and then the second industrial revolution is here. We're going to see, like how they did the yearbook with that picture. I used to have that picture in my room, but it got torn when I was taking it off the wall. Because once you put stuff on here, it's either stuck or it never stays. But where they're all eating their lunch on the skyscrapers, that job horrifies me. Like, I would never, like these didn't know. Like, I just, even looking at it. When I made it to the top of the Eiffel Tower, I was just like, and then back away. Like, I don't like the thought of, like, I could possibly somehow someone runs into me and I get, like, fall off of something. Yes. Oh, yeah. So you're like, someone would have had to, like, flip you over head by head over end. Yes, we're going to hit postmodernism. That's in this packet. Look at the back. Yeah, look at the back. Look, page 15. Post-impressionism, postmodernism. We're all getting there. We're going to get to the first part here, and then postmodernism we're going to get to a little bit later. But post-impressionism, yeah. So, Bessemer process. Did everyone get all... I typed all this up for you. Did you all get this? There's my really cool Bessemer process picture. I'm not a engineer, so all I can tell you about it is that you take the carbon out and it makes it stronger. Anybody have anything they want to add about the Bessemer process? Because I don't... Yeah. Huh? Yeah. I've read, I actually, like, legit, I'm like, I always preface, I'm your history teacher, I am not an engineer. And one time I was like, maybe I should be able to explain this more fully. So I checked out a book from the public library. I spent 2 days in this book and one big headache later and was like, yeah, I'm going to leave that to another teacher. It's a lot more complex than you would think it would be than just to take carbon out of metal. Anyway. All right. So, C, expansion of industry is going to change our workforce, guys. So we are going to have experts with specialized knowledge. This is more like today. This is where you get, what have your guidance counselors have been asking you this year? What do you want to be? What do you want to go into? Have you gotten that? Or people are asking you because you're seniors? Before, when we were studying history, it would have been, I'm going to get well-rounded in everything, right? You kind of go out and are supposed to be specialized now. This starts in this time period. This starts that you need to be experts with specialized knowledge. Science and technology will become closely linked. We will see professionals in engineering, architecture, chemistry, accounting, and surveying. We're going to see management positions open up. You're going to need someone to manage groups of people, large public and private institutions. This is because industries got so large, you needed someone to be accountable for how they run. Okay, it wasn't like a little cottage industry where the dad's like, whack, stir that wool a little faster, kid. Like, these are big industries. You need someone accountable for them. By the 1890s, Germany is going to become our most powerful industrial economy in Europe. That's after Germany becomes a nation, 1871. So 1890s, the rise of Germany, all here, surpassing Britain with the Second Industrial Revolution. Then, dun dun dun, it's going to be World War I. Okay, so like they get... Yeah. So, Britain's huge investment, like I said, in technology early on, that meant that it had a harder time shifting to the Second Industrial Revolution. It's just a fact of pioneering. You put all your money into the first round, you're going to be behind in the second. Germany came into industrialization later and was able to utilize state-of-art technology. All of their equipment's bright, shiny, and new. Have you ever bought something like brand new and then right behind it became something even better and you're like, yeah. Like, it's just, my husband's thing was, what was it? What did I finally approve? The Xbox. And then right after that, the brand new Xbox came. And he was like, that's just the story of life. So you're just behind. You'll have to be with this first wave of gamers, and then later you'll catch up, maybe. Anyway, so industrial, I went the wrong way. There we go, Andrew Carnegie, pioneering, don't pay. There's my quote I've been telling you for a while, pioneering, don't pay. So, industrialism continued to attract huge numbers of workers to city. This is our urbanization again. We're going to see that by 1900, over half of industrial workers in Britain, Germany, and Belgium worked for companies with more than 20 workers. So we see the continuation of urbanization just like in the first industrial revolution, and that's our next topic. Okay. I think I mentioned to you before, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to remember, but that this urban sprawl has not been beat, except for right now with China. The movement from the countryside to cities in China is probably going to surpass this urbanization, but it has not been beat since this time, the growth of cities. Britain was actually the first large European country to experience urban growth, over 50% of population in 1891. Lived in urban areas. London was by far the largest city in Europe at this time. But the population of Europe is going to increase by 50% between 1870 and 1914. That's a lot of labor force. That's a lot of people. And we're going to see that's a lot of individuals to go off to war. Malthus, if you remember, our doom and gloom economies would say, "Aw crap, death, famine's got to happen." Well, he's not too off base, because what comes up shortly? World War I. By 1900, 9 European cities had populations over 1 million. Significant decline in mortality rates, especially among children. People are living longer. Birth rates actually fell during this period. So what that means is if we have more people, but birth rates are falling because people are choosing to have less children because, like, not half of their children are dying, then people are living longer. Like, if you're a child, this is cool. Your parents are going to name you and actually love you because you might live. Like, we're going to talk about that. That becomes significant to you. You're like, you don't get, like, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. You're like Billy or Johnny. It's awesome. You can put now finally, off to the side of number 3. It is finally now medical knowledge that is going to improve mortality. Okay, so it is going to improve life expands. Before, in the first industrial revolution, it was not. It was not scientific advances. Now it is. Better nutrition and housing were also reasons. Number of children. Yes.
I know, like in the city, the huge issues of slums and better housing and where?
Better housing, and the fact that we're going to start to widen boulevards. We're going to try to let some sunlight in. We're going to talk about all of this, but we're going to start to have the sanitary movement. The idea of, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be tromping around our own poo. The cholera epidemic is going to bring that to light, especially in Britain. Like, yeah. Ooh, cholera freaks me out. But here's an example of urbanization, like in England, Lyon, and then spreading out. So, okay, so this will get to, Laura's always one step ahead of me. We're going to get to the living conditions and how we get through that. But we are going to see the number of children per family are actually going to fall. Like I said, people start having less children because they start to expect their children to live. And they can't afford to support families with those large amount of children if they have as many as they were once having. Half of them are not now dying. So we'll talk about how children are treated differently in this time period in a little bit. So poor living conditions during the first half of the 19th century. Remember, things get better. So only during the first half are we like, ooh, that's bad. In this part, we are going to see that the fast industrialization and urbanization is going to be answered with some reform programs. So we'll see parks and open spaces. At the beginning are non-existent, but by the end of this lecture, we're going to see that we start to see where you have those green spaces in cities. Many people lived in extremely overcrowded attics or cellars, as many as 10 people per room. So as Laura was saying, disease, especially something like cholera when you have waste and open waste. Open drains and sewers are going to flow along the streets with garbage and excrement. Disease and stench, and cholera is going to be one of the main ones. The streets are so narrow, and industrialization and urbanization happen so fast, there's no sunlight even coming in, so lack of vitamin D also leads to disease, and total absence of public transportation, so people can't live outside the city and bus in. All of this is getting ready to change. So in reaction to that, in reaction to the poor conditions in the first half of the 19th century, we have a public health movement. It sought to remedy high disease and mortality rate that occurred in cities. We are going to see that King Cholera, and here, oh, I forgot, I just have some pictures of the narrow streets and open sewage there. But King Cholera is the number one reason for our public health movement. The sewage gets into the drinking water, and it causes massive diarrhea and like you just pretty much die of really quick dehydration in a pretty horrible way. It's going to be rampant at this time, especially in Britain. It's going to hit in 1831 to 32, 1848 to 49, 1854, 1867. They don't know what the cause is right off the bat. And then when they figure it out, they realize we need to clean up our cities. So Edwin Chadwick is going to become the most important reformer in this time period. Oh, here's some political cartoons. I forgot I do these in there. So King Cholera is often pictured as this very handsome Grim Reaper-esque gentleman and pumping the water for children and individuals here. And just like, ooh, yeah. So Edwin Chadwick becomes the most important reformer, like I said, of living conditions in cities. He was highly influenced by Jeremy Bentham, if you remember the guy with the head in the, not in the box, but somewhere outside the box that's brought out on special occasions. So he says we need the laws that improve the lives of the maximum number of people. And so he kind of bases his public safety off of that and the idea of utilitarianism, or greatest good for greatest number. He saw disease and death as primary causes of poverty. Who was usually living down in the slums and exposed to most of the waste was poverty, and that would continue to keep you in poverty because it kept you sick, it kept part of the family out of work, etc. And so he gave us a sanitary idea. This is where you saw disease, believed disease could be prevented by cleaning up the urban environment. So it's the idea that you can clean things up, that it's actually putting two and two together. Oh, maybe like waiting around and dragging poo in on your shoes isn't a healthy way to live, and like let your little toddlers crawl around on the floor, and then you're changing their diaper and their excrement gets on you, and then so maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe we need to do something about it. And so he's going to suggest that they bring in supply of clean piped water, and that they hand remove all of the excrement from the street. So lovely job. Remember the apartments where you would get to live on the top floor and be the most wealthy with the most or least pleasant job? I'd have to say that would be the least pleasant, like hand scooping people poop. And yeah, I mean, you should be the richest person in society. So, like I said, Britain suffered the most from the cholera epidemic, but most European cities had seen significant progress in public sanitation by the 1860s and 1870s. So first part, 19th century, bad. Second part, good as a result. Just know that break. So urban planning and public transportation were two other things we needed to fix. France is actually going to take the lead at this. We left off with the reign of Napoleon III. He is going to step up and have Paris reorganized. He says Paris needs a redesign. Part of this reason is, what did French people do when they start a revolution? Build barricades. If you have a very, very, very wide street, it would be very hard to build a barricade. So part of it's like, hey, we need to clean up and let some sunlight in. The other part of it is try to build a barricade on this, French people. And so we're going to see why boulevards are developed by George von Haussmann, who is our redeveloper of Paris, partially to prevent barricades, but the other part is sanitary. We'll see better, so they have to tear down all these houses to create wider boulevards, so we'll see better housing for middle class outside. What do you need when you move people out of the city that work in the city? Public transportation. So we'll see the demolition of slums, creation of parks and open spaces, and then we're going to talk about in a second the electric streetcar. So this is our white boulevards. This is a political cartoon of Haussmann and his redevelopment of Paris. I just think it's hilarious. He's like supposed to be carving apart and like building it like a beaver builds a dam, but like building up, like they move the richer people out and get them out of the dirt, and I don't know, it cracks me up. Anyway, he's also going to create parks and open spaces. I mean, he demolishes these slums, but there's no rebuilding for the lower classes, so they're still kind of stuck. So open parks we're going to see aqueducts, double fresh water supply, which is very important if you don't want to get cholera. And then these new people that live outside the city. So here's some examples of the actual boulevards. I mean, try building a barricade across that. Can you imagine? Like, that would take forever. So the wider boulevards, great. I mean, I guess now with cars, if you really wanted to pile up some cars across there, that'd still be a lot of work. Tiny cars, even more work.
Easy
Yeah.
to understand.
So we'll also see mass transportation by the 1890s. The electric streetcar had revolutionized city transportation. You can now live outside of all of this dirt and filth and transport into work. And so the electric streetcar becomes important. We're going to see the creation of suburbs in Europe, and the creation of London's subway system, and then Paris's metro. The most horrifying event in my life was on Paris's metro. Like, I was only 15 when I was there, so it's on the platform, and I wasn't ready for like the massive push that was going to happen as people tried to clamor on, and so I didn't have myself braced. I was like trying to read the metro map to see what color I needed to get off on, and I got pushed down in the hole between the train and the platform. And I just stood there like, what do you do? First of all, I had never been on a subway or anything, and I didn't know what to do. Then I had a backpack on. Next thing I know, some guy just takes, a little tab on the top of your backpack and just pulls me up and throws me on the train. And just, like, walks off all casually like nothing even happened. I rode the train all day. I just didn't even want to get off. I was like, I'm not getting off this train. Like, it was horrifying. But I lived to tell the tale.
So many subways this week, and I was so unprepared.
Just do not be on the platform. Like, stand back. Know that you will get on.
First of all, I should navigate New York, and then I have to figure out how to get a train.
Okay, no, the New York subway is trash. I bet it's staying on. European subways, yeah, like New York.
Yeah.
Like I've been to Hong Kong, right? And Asian subways are fine, European subways are fine. And like the thing about American subways is they're like government owned. Like I hate to be like this, but they're like I'm pretty sure the underground private company, like the one in Hong Kong is a private company. Like they have stocks and stuff.
Yeah.
So they better keep up quality. So if it's right. But New York is just government based.
I've never been on the New York subway.
Right.
I've been on the, yeah. I've been on the jet train in Japan. I mean, that's crazy fun. But yeah, also like they have little carts and little like food and hot towels and like it's crazy nice. They come stop and clean it all the time. But yeah, so sorry, didn't mean to like throw some more anxiety there at Jamat, but that was my I survived it. I was 15. You can totally make it. So we'll see by 1900, only 9% of Britain's urban population was overcrowded because so many people are able to move to the suburbs. So streetcar, yay. Here's some examples of streetcars, early ones. A photograph and an illustration. All right, so migration and immigration. We're also going to see not only people are moving out to the suburbs, we are also going to see significant migration to cities from the countryside continue. Although migrants often maintain a connection to their rural areas, so we still see some migration from rural to urban. And also immigration completely out of the country. We will see huge numbers of Southern and Eastern Europeans start migrating to America's largest cities after 1880 in search of economic opportunity. Mainly Italy and Russia because of all the chaos going there. It's mainly the south and east of Europe that we're getting an influx. So if you watch like in U.S. history, you will see that this is that influx of South and East Europeans in this time period to America. So if you were part of those immigrant families, hurrah for you. So social structure. As a result of the Industrial Revolution and urbanization, we see an increased standard of living occurred in the second half of the 19th century. We will see the gap, however, between the wealthy and the working class is still huge. We will see the golden age of the middle class, and we're going to talk about that. Consumption will increase because people will have more money to spend, etc., and we're going to talk about that. We won't go into too much detail now. Expansion of industry and technology created growing demand for experts with specialized knowledge. We've already covered that. This is just a recap. All right, and so then industrial and urban development made society more diverse and less unified. So we need to talk about our new groups. Some newer to us, some brand new. Some we've discussed a little bit. So, diversity within the middle class or bourgeoisie, we will see more diversity within the bourgeoisie than unity. There are more divisions than there are unifying factors within our bourgeoisie. About 15 to 20% of the population in Western Europe. So we still have less in Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe is still lagging behind with a lack of middle class. We have an upper middle class. So if you do a tier, put a number 1 by the upper middle class. They are the top of the middle class. We are going to see that they are bankers, industrial leaders, large-scale commerce, top government officials. You can kind of tell who they are because they will have employed several domestic servants in their home. That's also another sign, not only their profession, but their domestic servant number in their home. Then we have level 2, which is C, the diversified middle class. These are our smaller businessmen, professionals, merchants, doctors, lawyers, civil servants. They have at least one servant, domestic servant, working in their home. So that's how you can also identify them. And then we've talked about our lower middle class, tier 3, our petit bourgeoisie. They are independent shopkeepers and small merchants. They're also our store managers, minor civil servants, teachers, clerks, and some master craftsmen, such as goldsmiths. So I would have fallen in this category. You wouldn't see me with a domestic servant because they wouldn't have been able to afford one. But they grew from about 7%, our petit bourgeoisie, to 20% in 1900. And we're going to start to see women join this group in department stores, stenographers, secretaries, roles that unfortunately won't shake as traditional female jobs even to today in lots of places. Characteristics of the middle class. Strongly believed in classical liberalism and sought protection of property. Okay, so they want the government to step in and protect their things. We'll still see that Protestant work ethic very strong in the middle class. They emphasize individual liberty and respectability based on economic success. So they're proud of what they've gained and do not want to lose it, and they want their children to do better than them. This is a trend we'll see. The families emphasize frugality and planning for the future. I would put delayed gratification here next to the middle class. It's really all about let's save, plan, so that we can provide better for our children. So it's not like, hey, let's go out and consume all of these new goods. It's delayed gratification. So I put that next to D there, with emphasized frugality and planning for the future.
So, was the lower middle class considered to be part of the proletariat or the bourgeoisie?
The bourgeoisie. They are the very bottom.
So they were hated by the workers too?
They're going to be not as hated, but they're on that fringe. They are still seen as upper class, middle class individuals.
So were these people also in favor of like a lot of the social reforms that like the Labor Party people wanted?
They sought protection of their property, and so they're going to be opposed to anything that infringed upon that. We're going to see the working class is going to make up about 80% of our population, which is why it's going to become a force here. While we're seeing all that push for social reform that we've talked about, they're going to become large. One thing I want you to write, and I forgot to put next to middle class, when you hear about Victorian morality, this is a middle class value from this time period because Queen Victoria was queen. Victorian morality means they're always trying to get better by having personal restraint. So that comes from that, like, I'm going to save my money, I'm going to be frugal, I'm going to plan for my children's future. That's a Victorian value. I forgot to tell you that often the middle class in this time period are characterized as Victorian morals through self-restraint, and we'll talk about restraint in other areas with Victorian morals in a little bit. So
Why were they saying that the working class, like the Labor Party, was such like a large amount of people in that? It's like in all those, like the second half of all those documents, it's all like, oh, we're like the majority of people in the race, so let's unite and.
yeah, because the working class is about 80% of the
Oh,
population.
so that includes these people?
So we're switching gears from the middle class. So I just dropped off middle class to working class
Oh, okay.
is going to be 80%.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry, it kind of combined on this slide, but in your notes, it's divided by.
Oh, yeah, that was.
So working class, 80% of population, many were peasants and hired hands, especially in Eastern Europe. They are less unified and homogenous compared to middle classes. Highly skilled workers were at the top. Semi-skilled workers and unskilled workers. So there's still 3 tiers, but they're easier to determine. I mean, like here, you have your highly skilled workers that are like your construction bosses and foremen. And then, of course, under them are going to be your carpentry bricklayers, so they have a specialized skill too. And then unskilled workers are mainly domestic servants, so kind of at the bottom. And unfortunately, women fall there as well. So we have some changing family stuff going on. This is one of my favorite, like, Victorian, like, you can get married for love now. Love is a thing. You're allowed. It became the most important reason for marriage by 1850. We've never seen that. The rising standard of living is going to make this possible. You can marry at a younger age. Oh, do you guys have a question? Really tiny?
Well, they're young.
They are pretty young. Like, we're looking at the marrying age here, like early 20s. He's also sitting. I don't know if that makes a difference. I don't know. I guess I'd never seen that. Is it because she's holding that basket in front of her, and then there's the dog at the bottom that you think she's really short? Because her legs extend to past the bottom of the picture, and he's sitting on a post.
That's a long way.
Yeah, I mean, because like right here, there's the dog, and then her dress flows down beneath the basket that she's carrying. I don't know. Maybe I'm just I don't know. Yeah. But you have to remember, no, that's not her waist. Like, that is like a
That'd be, like, right
very
here.
high. Yeah.
So like about here. So like just like
No, this would have been like an A-line dress, like just right here, just the strap and then the rest of the dress. Yeah.
Especially in comparison.
I don't know. I just always thought it was a very sweet representation of Victorian love. So the rising standard of living made it possible for you to marry younger and to not have to marry for economic reasons. However, your economic status was still important. Like, if you were in the middle class, your family was not going to be okay with you marrying that boy from the other side of the tracks. Or in this case, it would have been suburban lady marrying a slum boy. Okay? So middle-class females will be monitored extremely closely by parents to ensure these kind of things didn't happen. Chastity was paramount. They're like, hey, we worked this hard to get here. We are middle class. Do not ruin everything by going out there and getting with the wrong boy or getting knocked up by the wrong boy. We made all of this planning and money, so you need to marry well and do well. So that's kind of those middle-class Victorian values there. Middle-class boys, not monitored as much. I'm sure that if any of you have brothers, that you feel that maybe they're not monitored as closely as you are as a girl either. We will see a high rate of illegitimacy also decrease, though. The Victorians would say this is because of all of their monitoring. I don't think so. What it is you could get married earlier and it wasn't dependent upon an arrangement. So if you had sex before you were married, you would just get married real quick, and then the baby wouldn't be illegitimate because you were married before it was born. So that's kind of the difference here. There's still a high rate of premarital sex. It's just if you ended up pregnant, a marriage took place. Fidelity in marriage becomes particularly emphasized in the middle class. That becomes a bourgeoisie value. There will be some prostitution, though, so that seems totally counterintuitive to the Victorian morals. But for those men that aren't able to marry as young, after 1815, the work of most wives was increasingly distinct and separate from their husbands. This is where we get that domestic kind of division. Marked contrast with pre-industrial Europe. If you were a woman in pre-industrial Europe, like farming and cottage industry, you were a part of the system. Like, you worked alongside your husband. You were there with your children working. Now you're very distinct and different. Husbands became the primary wage earners, especially in the middle class, and child rearing becomes more child-centered with the wife dominating the home. So instead of it being a group effort in the family. Women are going to start to resent this distinct separateness and division of labor, and eventually they will rise up for some women's rights, and we'll see that coming up shortly. So to the topic most seniors want to hear about. Oh, there's the distinctness. Child rearing. So child rearing is going to change. This is exactly why. I mean, it kind of sticks around. So pre this time period, you would have been one of many children that may or may not have survived. There wouldn't have been this like real attachment. You kind of worked in the family units, but the dynamic was different. But lower mortality rates in this time period for children are going to result in parents becoming more emotionally involved in their children's lives. Like, hey, I'm going to give you a name, number 2. You are now Johnny, like, and you're going to stick around and go ahead and name them and love you. Like, I'm going to develop love for you. So this is mainly for the middle class. High mortality rates before this time, mothers were really kind of indifferent towards their children. Like, you're just here. Now mothers are actually going to increasingly breastfeed their own children if they're middle class. Before this time, they've been so indifferent to their children, wet nurses were hired. Now they're like, I should bond with this baby. Like, it's going to make it. Fewer children were abandoned at foundling hospitals. Married couples actually start to decrease the number of children that they have, especially the middle class. Increase in books published on how to raise your child are going to be brought in this time period. And parents became much more intent. Have you ever heard your parents say, I want your life to be better than mine, or I want to give you things I didn't have? That's where this middle class value kind of comes from. Here, sexual conduct will become the center of the middle class family. This is a very Victorian value here. You need to maintain our family's reputation. You need to make sure you do not blur those lines. And so they almost repress sexuality for their children. Boys are treated kind of differently, but they're never left alone, really, kind of supervision. And girls are forbidden from riding bikes or horses unless they're side saddle, for the connotation that could have, or things it might lead them to do after jumping on a bike, is what Victorians thought. So I'll leave that at that. So let's talk about child rearing in working class families. It is different. Unlike middle class kids, working class children did not remain under their parents' diligence up to the time of marriage. Working class kiddos had to go out and work. They provided part of the income, which means they also, it's kind of like I'm not under your roof, you don't have a say over me. That's a working class kid. They didn't have this strict, rigid overseeing of them. Boys and girls went to work when they reached adolescence. Young working class adolescents broke away from their family more easily and broke those emotional ties. Okay? Trying to see where we're at. We're at 37 minutes. We have one little part to finish, and then I'll turn you loose. Okay. So life in the fin de Sicile, end of the century. That's just a thing. The end of the century is what that means. This will be your next group of study questions that you'll get next time with the answers to the last ones. So we are in part 4 here, page 7, top of the page. We are going to start to see that the end of the century is going to bring in an increased standard of living in all industrial countries. I just like this picture. I'll explain the good old days to you, and we'll read the caption. It's one of my faves. This period would later be remembered after World War I. So in the time that you're living it is called the fin de Sicile, the end of the century. After World War I, people are going to look at it as the Belle Epoque, the good old days. It starts to see is when people reminisce when things were good, before all these people died, before we tore the world apart. This is what they look back on. And so this picture says the good old days, when men were men, boys dressed like men, prisons took children, and fruit was candy. So, anyway, that's the good old days. However, better living occurred much more in Northern Europe. So we still see the South and East, which is why people are fleeing to America. Not so good. So the good old days really only pertains to Northern Europe. People were eating better. They're going to look back and just everything seemed so much better before World War I. People gradually enjoyed higher wages while the price of food declined. They can come to spend that extra money on clothing and nicer clothing and consumption. And leisure time will be something you have. You actually have time and you can pay to do things. We're going to see the development of sports, and not just playing a sport, but going to watch a sport being played becomes significant. So increased consumption. Sports are going to start to attract spectators and participants in this time. you will join a sport, a club as they call them, like, boxing club, sports clubs. So these become things you do when you're off of work. Soccer, football, rugby, bicycle, automobile races, track and field are our top. There's this huge bicycle craze during this time period. The development of rubber has happened. Like, everything was about bikes. And that's the 1890s. Does anyone know where all of this rubber starts to come from this time? 1890s, rubber. It is it's a tree. Does anyone know where? What? Not Australia. It starts with an A, though, and it's Africa. Does anyone know where in Africa?
South Africa. Ghana. Morocco.
We're going to see Belgium takes the Congo and is going to exploit it for all of its rubber. Yes.
I have a super racist TikTok. Don't worry, like, I was gonna
The
cover it.
Congo?
It's so
Oh, it's so horrible. Have you seen those pictures? Did you guys see those pictures in U.S. history? But of, like, the workers, of what the punishment for them if they didn't produce enough. We'll get there. But it's a part of imperialism that a lot of people would like to forget happened. But, increasing numbers of women took part in bicycling. Finally, some of those Victorian values are going to fall off, especially for the working class. And be like, I am not wearing this corset and this crazy dress and not being able to get on a bike. So they start to lose some of those restrictive clothes. You can see this woman here on her bike, and so we'll see that going, allow them to move and be on bicycles. The emerging sports culture mirrored the growth of aggressive nationalism, however. Some students really don't get this. We start to say before, and it's almost like setting the stage with sports competitions. They're like, I'm going to beat you in lacrosse. I'm going to beat you at this sport. Like, it's high-driven nationalistic competition in these sports, and it feeds off social Darwinism. If I'm better than you in this game, then we are better than you as a nation. And ironically, then, at the same time, the modern Olympics come back. So we'll see in 1896 the revival of the modern Olympics and nation versus nation. Like, we are supreme to you because we beat you in this many Olympic Games. Cafes and taverns are going to pop up. Department stores, dance halls. So we have some recreation time, some leisure time. New inventions. So all kinds of fun stuff comes out. Speaking of leisure time, the telephone. Chat it up with your girlfriend down the street. You don't have to walk down there with your kids. Automobile, gramophone.
Whoa.
Yeah. Gramophone, radio, and motion pictures are all going to come to the edge. So all that. Education. State's role in education increased. It's why you're sitting here listening to me diligently with your district given iPads, is because the state took a role in education and secularization of society. It emphasized the loyalty and service to the state while decreasing the influence of organized religion. Okay? By 1900 in England, all children 5 to 12 years old were required to attend primary school. Education was free with a little there's always a cost. Tax money paid for education. In France, the Ferry laws, which comes from Jules Ferry, required children ages 3 to 13 to attend primary schools. We'll see because of this, an increase in literacy. You would hope so. Like, if it went down, you'd be wondering. Men had higher rates of literacy than women because education was provided to them more fully. And again, the North is ahead of South and Eastern Europe. Girls had less access to secondary education than boys, though schools for girls will grow for middle-class women because it's seen as a way to get a better marriage. North. Yep. I don't mean it as like I think they're better, but then they're still ahead. Let's clarify that for the viewing public. If we have any left after. All right, and so that's it. We're going to pick up with scientific advances next time, and that will take us through the end because this is a little packet. It's going to go fast. We have some cool people that you've probably already heard about a million times in science classes. I'll do my best with Einstein's theory and some of the science and not muck it up. Einstein's, ironically, is the easiest of some of these theories that we have to go. And then, yeah, we'll be done with Unit 6.2.